It's the 2022 World Cup. It's Belgium's players. Hello and welcome to the International Soccer Preview by Soccerphiles Canada. I'm Kevin and today we'll be looking at Belgium's squad for the 2022
Short
World
version,
Cup.
please.
Okay, well that does bring us to the end of the player-by-player discussion. And we may have some new listeners or watchers coming in for the short version of this. So once again, I will explain why I'm wearing a Canada shirt. I kind of went into fan mode at the beginning in the long podcast when we started talking about Belgium. Kind of lost my head as a Canadian fan. So I'll just say I'm wearing a Canada shirt as a subtle threat to Belgium. Yes, we're coming. Okay, let's go over some of the notes that we had coming out of the previous podcasts that we did, and we'll detail them a little bit more here. So for Belgium, we have an aging golden generation. So many of the biggest names are in their 30s now, and they seem to be, Belgium seems to be doing well, bringing in new talent. But I would say that new talent is not at the level of the golden generation. I'm thinking De Bruyne, Hazard, the two defenders, or the defenders, Alderweireld and Vertonghen and Vermaelen and Thibaut Courtois. Some of them have already moved from top clubs that they were with, kind of down a rung or two, still with good clubs, but slightly lesser than the top quality clubs that they had been with. And overall, it's hard to see Belgium maintaining the level that the golden generation has been playing at. And this may actually be the last shot for that golden generation, as I imagine some of the main players will be retiring now that they're in their 30s. Over that period of the golden generation, Belgium has been very good, but not great. And I'm comparing kind of their FIFA rankings to their results in tournaments for the most part. They've been first in FIFA rankings quite often since 2015 and consistently actually since late 2018 and ELO rankings, which we actually trust a little bit more. They've been first at several points and are usually in the top four. However, in tournaments, they've reached third place in the World Cup, which was their best result, and otherwise the quarterfinals. So for a team that is ranked first, that's a kind of slightly disappointing result. 1 second, please. So yeah, never quite reaching the heights that they might have, and generally it is very strong teams that get the better of them. So when they meet Italy, France, Argentina, those are the teams that have been knocking them out. And they also have a particular problem with Wales, which, because that's where I'm from, I kind of delight in. But I hope I do like Belgium, but I just like Wales and Canada slightly more. Okay, so very good results for Belgium, but not as great as their potential kind of promised. Recently, too, we see a slight drop in consistency for Belgium. I mean, they hold a very high standard, and especially in qualifying, they've only lost one game in qualifying since 2014. That was to Wales, who seem to have their number. But in recent games, in their recent 8 games, they've won 3, tied 2, and lost 3. Now, it should be said that they've been playing pretty good teams. Again, France and Italy. Netherlands was another team they lost to. And one of the ties was against the thorny Wales. So, you know, not much, nothing to really worry about, but a slight drop in consistency for a very good team. Yeah, so those are the things that came out of the team podcast that we did. What comes out of this podcast as we went through the players was kind of an imbalance in positions. So what I mean by that is they have some positions like goalkeepers, left wingers, and attacking midfielders where they have too many candidates. And, they want these players on the field. So the only option there is to have them playing out of position. And obviously not a huge problem because they continue to do well. But they also have some positions like outside backs and defensive midfielders. And I would say kind of outside midfielders, right and left midfielders, where they lack candidates. And honestly, I think this could be an important point, really, because I wonder if that kind of dictates the formation that they have to choose. So we've seen that they've consistently chosen a 3-4-2-1 formation, and the only real deviation has been making it a 3-2-2-2-1 formation. So just a slight deviation with the wingers playing slightly higher. And I kind of wonder if they're kind of forced into that because of the positions that their players choose. My concern for Belgium is that they are facing teams with strong wingers. They'll be facing attacks from strong wingers. So for Morocco, there's Hakimi. They're coming down the right side. Why do I think of him as a left? Anyway, coming down the side of the pitch for Croatia, Perisic is a threat on the wings, and for Canada, Buchanan and Alphonso Davies are a threat on the wings. So I'm a bit worried about them not having kind of outside left backs and right backs. But it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. But we'll talk about it a bit more below when we go through the positions. Let's look at club affiliations for Belgium, and really they're kind of the envy of the world here, playing for mostly for top clubs in Europe. So among some of the top clubs, we have Manchester City. Manchester City. Real Madrid is represented with a couple of players, Hazard and Courtois. Atletico Madrid has Carrasco, and Borussia Dortmund in Germany there with Thorgan Hazard. And I thought they had a couple of players with Borussia Dortmund. Thomas Meunier. And as we saw, some of the veterans kind of were with top clubs and have taken a step down. So a step down to a slightly lesser club. So, for example, Jan Vertonghen is now with Anderlecht, but he was with a big club. We also have four players playing for Leicester in Europe. So not a top club in Europe. In England there, but a very solid club. And Brighton and Aston Villa besides. So. And then plenty of other respectable clubs. Milan, they have a couple of players that more of a top club there. Reims and Lens in France, Sevilla in Spain, and Fenerbahce in Turkey. Fenerbahce and Galatasaray. And they also have Anderlecht is probably the main club. But actually only represented by one player, Vertonghen there. But a lot of these players have come through Anderlecht. It's the biggest club in Belgium. Actually, more players play for Club Brugge. I don't know if I've mentioned, but Canada has two players on Club Brugge in Belgium. But Belgium has three. Vanaken, Boyata, and Mignolet all play for Club Brugge, and they're in the Champions League this season. So very good pedigree in terms of club affiliations. And let's move on to talk about the stats that I've been putting together for teams here as I go through these podcasts. one of the stats I have is how many players do they kind of have on the table in front of them on the slate. And to do this, I'm basically looking at players that have been called up since 2020, although it's a bit of a rough estimate. But it's 43 for Belgium, and the average is 49. So a bit lower than average. And what lower tends to mean is one of two things: either they don't really have that many candidates to choose from, or they're a very tight squad, so they don't feel the need to kind of bring in new players and experiment that much. And I would say the latter is more true of Belgium. However, we have seen in some positions that they don't seem to have a lot of candidates for positions like left back and right back, and some of the central midfield positions there. So I think this number 43 is a bit low, and is a bit different than most teams in that they have kind of an overabundance in some positions and a lack of candidates in other positions. But again, they've done so well that it doesn't seem to matter that much. Players playing out of position doesn't seem a big problem for Belgium. Total number of players under consideration, that's the players we've categorized as definite, likely, or possible, is 32, and the average is 33. So not much to comment on there. And then the total number of players in the definite and likely category is 22. And what that kind of means is that they've pretty much decided on 22 of the 26 players they will bring. And of course, there's always the possibility of a surprise or injuries that might lower that number. And to fill the remaining positions, the total number of players under consideration, 32, means that they would basically be choosing the other 4 from among those, probably those who are in the possible category here. But again, room for surprises there with players coming into form. And to be honest, I should have said this earlier, I kind of suspect that they might be bringing in a couple of players in September who are left backs or right backs or central midfielders, so that it will give them the ability to be more flexible in their formation, because they've used that same 3-4-2-1 formation throughout the period, the 13 games that we've talked about, and actually throughout the Euro Cup too. So a little bit of ability to adapt to other teams might serve them well. So I wouldn't be surprised if they do try out a few new players in September there, but we'll report on that in the update podcast. Okay, in terms of average age, Belgium is 28.5. Most teams are somewhere between 25 and 27. The average is 26.7. So compared to other teams, Belgium is actually quite a bit older than the other teams. The oldest team we have besides Belgium is Iran at 27.7. That doesn't really mean much. I'll just say 28.5 is quite old. Again, not sure if it's something for Belgium to worry about, because with age comes experience, and the average number of caps they have among the definite, possible, and likely players is 45.1. Again, that's significantly higher than any other team, and than the average. The average is 28.5. So they're bringing a very experienced team, although a bit of an older team. So I'll just talk about the age a little bit more here. They have 14 of those 32 players are 30 years old or older. If we extend that down to 29 years old, then 19 of the 32 players are 29 years old or older. At the other end of the scale, they only have 4 players who are 23-year-old or younger, and most of those are in the possible category. In fact, all of them are. The only kind of starter is Yuri Tielemans, who's 25 years old. That's kind of their youngest starter. So they probably will be rebuilding after the Cup. But I wonder if their age will kind of catch up with them a little bit here in the World Cup. But again, it is balanced with experience and with goals, because this is incredible. They have 268 goals among these players, and that is much higher than any other team. Germany, which we considered a high-scoring team, has 180, and France has 191. And if we bring this down to kind of goals per player to balance it out a little bit, it's 8.1 goals per player for Belgium, whereas Germany is 6 and France is actually 5.5. So Qatar is also actually a very high scoring team with 7 goals per player and 182 goals, but Belgium outstrips them quite a bit. And we'll take a look at who's scoring all of those goals. And we saw when we were in the player-by-player podcast the incredible numbers of some of their forwards. So Romelu Lukaku with 67% scoring ratio, and Christian Benteke 40%, and Michy Batshuayi at 55%. Anything above 40 is really high, and Romelu Lukaku has done it over 100 games, 68 goals in 102 games. So that's a very consistent performance. And then we have a lot of players who are above 10%, above 20% even. Leandro Trossard and Hans Vanaken both above 20%. Thorgan Hazard 20%, Kevin De Bruyne 26%, 27%, and Eden Hazard also 27%. So getting goals from all over the field, and even a rash of players with above 10%, including some of their more defensive players. So I won't yammer on too much about it, but scoring goals, not a problem. It kind of makes me shudder as a Canadian fan facing a team that so readily scores goals. All right, let's move on to player issues to watch. So in defense, we kind of covered this above, where we talked about an imbalance of positions. So that'll be detailed a bit here. Too many goalkeepers to choose from right now. They have 1 definite, 3 likely, and 1 possible candidate. So obviously they'll have to cut that down probably to 3 goalkeepers coming to the Cup, and someone will be disappointed. We'll talk about that when we go through the team by team and talk about the starters. But on the other hand, they're lacking right and left backs, or left backs and right backs. So it's a bit of a chicken and egg argument, really. Do they play with that 3-man defense because they lack these players in these positions, or are these players just not developing because they always use the 3-man defense? Which one causes the other? In other words, nevertheless, the result is that they do seem a bit forced into that 3-man defense because they lack the outside backs. And I predicted that they might try out a couple of right backs in the September games. Right and left backs in the September games. Because so that they can be a bit more varied in their formation, and B, because the teams they're playing have threats down the wings, which we talked about already. In the midfield, again, they're kind of lacking true defensive or central midfielders, also lacking kind of outside midfielders. So they don't really have the option to go with a 3-man central midfield, unless, of course, they have players playing out of position. And they do. That's been their solution, to have a couple of attacking midfielders play in central midfield, or to have the left wingers and right wingers kind of the outside midfielders playing as attacking midfielders, things like that. On the other hand, they have too many left midfielders. They have Eden Hazard, Thorgan Hazard, Leandro Trossard, and Dries Mertens, all as left midfielders. Those are players that are all possible starters, so they can't start all four of them as left wingers. Actually, sorry, that should be left wingers, not left midfielders. They can't start all of them, so logically they kind of move them to different positions. So players kind of playing slightly out of position. To go back to central midfielders, they have Tielemans, Witsel, and perhaps Prate as central midfielders, but sometimes they're drafting in attacking midfielders to those positions. So it doesn't seem like a huge problem for Belgium. They've managed just fine, but it may give them a bit of a lack of variety in varying their strategies towards other teams. Similarly, too many attacking midfielders, so De Bruyne, Vanaken, De Ketelaere, plus their overflow from the riches of left wingers that need a place to start. So we see players like Eden Hazard playing as attacking midfielder rather than winger and stuff. Again, at some point, there's such a talented team that there's not enough places for all the talent to go. But they do tend to be concentrated in a couple of positions. So those to get them onto the field, a number of players kind of playing out of position. But again, not a major problem. Okay, let's look at some of the new players that have come into the squad. We do see that it's a kind of an old squad. So they've been kind of going with the golden generations and the players that have established themselves since. So not a lot of new players for Belgium. But central defender Arthur Theat seems to be making his way into the squad. He's 22 years old, and we have him as a likely candidate. We won't go through all the information we did in the player-by-player, but just mention them by name here. Alexis Saelemaekers is a right winger, 23 years old now, and also a likely candidate. He plays for AC Milan, as does Charles de Ketelaere, also a likely candidate, just 21 years old, also with AC Milan. And we also have three possible players. We just did definite, likely, and possible here. Wout Faes hasn't actually played that much. He's 24 years old and just has the one cap. He recently moved to Leicester in England and hasn't really been a starter, but has been on the bench. Sieb van der Heyden has had just one start in a friendly, is 24 years old, but has one cap since 2022, may make it onto the squad and may not. And in the forward line, the other possible candidate, Lois Openda. So again, just coming in as a substitute there in June 2022, so may make it onto the squad or not. But Lois Openda is 22 years old and plays for Lens in France. So not a lot of new candidates compared to other teams. Now let's take a look at injuries. So the most worrying one is Romelu Lukaku. We saw that actually he missed 3 of the games in June with an ankle injury, but he did recover from that and was playing for his club in August. However, at the end of August, he was out with muscle problems. I think the problem was that he had too many of them. Okay, that was a joke. He is muscular, but whatever the muscle problem is, he's expected to return in mid to late October. So hopefully that won't be a problem. But I'm very interested in the September games because even before those injuries, Lukaku wasn't playing or wasn't starting as much for Belgium as one might expect. And I'm curious to see whether Michy Batshuayi is the starter in September. Well, he probably will be given these injuries, but we may have to wait until the Cup to see who the starter is as a centre forward. Less kind of worrying because the only possible candidate is Thomas Fouquet. So he was out with a hamstring injury from early August, and so that can be kind of a long-term injury, and we don't have a return date for him, an unknown return date. So Thomas Fouquet may not be fit for the Cup. Okay, let's take a look at some notable absences. So again, this golden generation kind of aging, but most of them are still there, although it could be the last tournament for quite a few players here. Thomas Vermaelen, though, has kind of aged out, if you will. He's 37 years old, and he last appeared in the Euro Cup. It was actually January 2022 when he announced his retirement, but 85 caps and played from 2006 to 21, but probably would be, won't be there for this Cup. Nasser Chadli also last appeared for the national team in 2021 Euro Cup, and he's been with the team since 2011 and has 66 caps and 8 goals. He's just 33 years old, so still a chance that he may be called back in. He hasn't announced his retirement or anything, just hasn't been selected. Jeremy Doku, a bit of a surprise to me because I thought he was quite good in the Euro 2020 Cup 2020, but hasn't been called up since. And he's just 20 years old, actually, so kind of came on the team quickly and then off the team quickly. But again, I wouldn't be shocked to see him find his way back in. Maybe not for this tournament, though. And then we always add the players, big players from the 2018 World Cup, because some listeners just follow teams from World Cup to World Cup. So people who follow Belgium will find that these players have been off the team for quite a while. But Vincent Kompany, he was with the team from 2004 to 2019. So even in the World Cup, he was kind of injured at the beginning of the tournament and was starting to look a little old at that time, 32 years old with the 2018 World Cup, but well off the team now. And then Marouane Fellaini, most memorable for his hair and his elbows. And he was with the team from 2007 to 18 and was 87 caps and 18 goals. He started actually in the, he was a sub in the 2018 World Cup. So another player who was kind of getting old even at the time of the 2018 World Cup. So we won't be seeing any of those players, or possibly Jeremy Doku or Nasser Chadli, but neither of them have played since the 2021 Euro Cup. Okay, well, we're going to finish with predicted starters here. So, and we'll try to name the definite and likely candidates. So we have Roberto Martinez as the manager. And of course, I doubt they'll change that before the Cup here. So he's a definite. A little difficult with goalkeepers because Thibaut Courtois definitely seems like the starter, and I'm going to nominate him that way. But he wasn't starting quite a few of the games since the end of in the last half of the period that we've talked about. So let's say from 2022. But injury did play a role in that. And we have 3 likely candidates in Simon Mignolet, Cohen Casteels, and Mats Sells. So Mignolet is probably the second keeper, and if Courtois isn't the starter, he probably would be. But I think Courtois will be if he's healthy. And I think Mats Sells is likely mostly because he came in to replace injured keepers, not just Thibaut Courtois, but other players were injured along the way. So I think he will be the one that they have to drop there. They'll have to drop one of those 4. Central defenders, we have a definite candidate in Leander Den Donker, although I don't see him as a starter. He actually has played central midfield more. but I don't see him as a starter either in defence or as a midfielder, but definitely someone they'll bring along to the Cup because they always call him up. Likely candidates, Toby Alderweireld, Jan Vertonghen, Arthur Theat. It's difficult to tell. I think it will be Alderweireld and Jan Tongen, and I think Boyata I would have named, except he was off the team for the last few games, so a bit uncertain there. The other possibility is kind of a rotation of these players, or some of the possible ones. They'll probably bring 5 or 6 to the Cup, and there has been a lot of rotation back there. So even with Alderweireld and Vertonghen, I'm a bit reluctant to say that they're definite starters. But they'll definitely be part of the rotation. I think I'm going to actually change it to yellow, suggesting they're part of the rotation. But I need to look at the September games to try to pin down who I think is going to be starting. For left backs, we don't have any candidates, and for right backs, we have Timothy Castagna. I think he will be a starter, probably as a right winger, although he has played as a left winger as well, and a couple of times in central defence. So I think he'll be on the field. They'll find a place for him on the field, Timothy Castagna. In the midfield, none of the defensive midfielders look like starters. There's actually only one who's a possible but unlikely candidate. But we have central midfielders Yuri Tielemans and Axel Witsel as definite, and Dennis Praet as possible, although I think they will bring him to the Cup. But I'm going to nominate Tielemans and Axel Witsel as starters. It's not necessarily going to be them, because they do sometimes bring attacking midfielders back in to start, but I'm pretty confident that they will start, will be the starting central midfielders. For left and right midfielders, we only have Thomas Meunier as likely or above, and I don't really feel confident enough to nominate him as a starter there. He usually plays the right wing position. I think it will be, but I'm not confident enough to say so, because again, a lot of other players have come into that position. For left wingers, these players are actually more often play as attacking midfielders. But Leandro Trossard, Yannick Carrasco, Thorgan Hazard are the definite unlikely players. And again, I'm not confident enough to say any of them will be starters. I kind of feel like it will be a rotation. Each of them will maybe start a couple of games rather than one firm starter there. On the right wing, we actually saw that it's the right midfielder, Thomas Meunier. So maybe I should put him as a potential starter. But no, I'm not confident enough to say so. They're very tough with Belgium, because they do have players rotating in and out quite a bit. However, we have Kevin De Bruyne and Hans Vanaken. In the player-by-player, I put them as versatile midfielders, because they kind of play all over the place. I think they'll definitely start, although I can't say with any confidence where they'll start. So they could start as central midfielders, perhaps replacing Tielemans or Witsel, or they could start as attacking midfielder. De Bruyne even started as a centre forward once. Moving on to attacking midfielders, we actually moved Eden Hazard from left wing to attacking midfielders, but honestly, I don't really think I see him as a starter anymore. I know he's had some fitness concerns, and they don't have an actual attacking midfielder position, so it's other players who play as the left attacking and right attacking midfielders. I think Hazard will get some starts, but won't be a firm starter. That's what I'm going to do, and label him in yellow. I sound very undecisive here, but really I think it's because they have rotated players in and out so much that it would be a mistake to say who's going to be a starter. Same with Batshuayi and Lukaku up at the top. Lukaku has only started 3 of their 13 games. So although I do see him as a starter, I'm not sure he's going to be starting all games in this tournament, especially given that he'll probably be coming off an injury. And in which case, I think Batshuayi will be the starter, but I don't really see him as a starter. So either. So I'm going to put them as kind of rotating starters. I think both of them will start some games and neither of them will start all games. Wow, that was really tough to do. I think I've only nominated probably 6 players as definite starters, but then probably about 10 players as players who will start, but not necessarily all the games. Anyway, we'll return to this in our update podcast in November. And that brings us to the end of this podcast. Keep in mind that we will be doing that update podcast probably in mid-November. And we'll have some new information coming out, the September games and any friendlies they play up to doing the podcast. And also we'll be seeing the preliminary and final rosters. I'm planning on doing this after they publish the final rosters. Keep an eye out for us at Soccerphiles Canada. That's Soccerphiles with a PH and in the middle and an S at the end. And you can visit our website at soccerphiles.captivate.fm. And check the show notes for our links to our website and previous podcast series. We've been improving those show notes, so there's good information there. Thank you so much for listening, and I hope you join us in our next media podcast. Bye-bye.